am meteorologist Ian Kowalski, and welcome back to this week's episode of Weather Eye. As per usual, I will check the date before I start the show. It is the 7th. I just wanted to make sure. We are on Thursday, the 7th of May, and what that means is we just got on the back end of a little bit of light rain here on the western slope. We wish we would have gotten a little bit more, and an earlier forecast did have more, but unfortunately, there is just not quite that thunderstorm development we would have wanted. I can talk more about in depth in another time, but the long and short of it is the Front Range got a whole lot of snow that we're going to show you video of later on, and us remaining on the drier end, lighter rainfall, and unfortunately, we really needed a lot more because what's coming next across the southwestern United States is just going to be warm, it's just going to be dry, and so much so that we're pushing into record-setting territory here in Grand Junction, Delta, Montrose, all across the western slope by the time we get to early next week. So a lot to talk about in that. I'm not sure everyone will be thrilled about what I have to say about those temperatures. It's the 90s, I'll tell you that now. But let's take a look across the nation first to start out our show. Let's take a look here. This is your upper level flow. Why are we starting with this? Because I want to show you what's happening. It's very simple. High pressure. It's pushing this low out of the area. And unfortunately, it's going to be cutting us off from any chance of Pacific moisture. And so as this thing just gets closer and closer towards us in the Four Corners region, it is just going to make for some very hot and very dry days. And you might notice a little bit of light orange down towards the south. That would be kind of an area of lower pressure overall. It's cutting us off for that. It's just going to stop anything that comes up from the Southwest Pacific from actually getting towards us here in western Colorado. So we're overall looking at a pretty dry week coming up. There's some light precipitation chances as we get later into next week. Not earlier, later into next week. But overall, it's still it's going to be very underwhelming is what we're expecting right now. And on top of that record-setting heat, all the snowpack that we did start to build up, thank goodness, unfortunately, is just going to take another dent to it. So we'll be looking at those numbers here in a little bit. But that's your setup. High pressure, dry. Speaking of dry, right here, let's take a look at this. This is a dry line. I know you see that little brown with the little curves there in the middle of our screen. We've talked about this on the show before, but I wanted to actually do a little highlight since it's a part of the big national forecast right now. And it's kind of one of the reasons that, again, we're not seeing too much moisture here in the western portion of the United States. You can see this green zone all in the southern and central portion of Texas, but not quite reaching the panhandle. And you have that line I've drawn over there. I got to make sure I'm pointing the right direction. If you've seen that line I've drawn right there, that is a dry line. What is a dry line? Well, it's called a dry line because that's where the moisture is cut off. You can see pretty clearly that gradient of the green transitioning to red just like that. Usually you'd have a bit of yellow zone, right? Something a bit softer transition between two different air masses. And different air masses are not just defined by temperature. I know we like to think, cold front, warm front, but moisture is a big factor in what is considered different and how movement of air works too. Because, in case you didn't know, moist air with water in it is actually lighter than dry air, believe it or not, because you have H2O, that's water, and oxygen is O2. Now, hydrogen is around 1 molecular weight, around 1 for our values. The actual unit is really important to the point. But oxygen is around 16. So literally 1/16, and you have 2 of those oxygens, so 32. It's a little quick math for you to show you that hydrogen doesn't weigh anything near what oxygen does. And so that's why you get the moisture air overall being lighter. But that's what causes rainfall too. That's why it goes up into the air. Long way of saying that's why you get dry lines, because you have lighter air getting pushed out by that heavier air. And that is why you usually get some storm development along those two. So let's take a look at these graphics right here and just get kind of a better visual of what I'm actually talking about when it comes to dry lines. You have the moist air, you have the dry air, and you have the gradual frontal slope that you see with every front, right? Remember, most of the time, that air is not shooting just directly up. It technically can happen, but usually when it runs into, let's put it into an analogy. Okay, when you, say you're on a sled. You're on a sled, correct? You're going downhill, and you run into a big pile of snow. You don't just go right through the snow, nor do you go immediately over, unless it's a really tightly packed mound of snow, nor do you immediately slide right over it like a hill. You go into it and then you go up a little bit as you start to get more resistance on your sled. And so that's basically the same thing right here. The moisture slowly ramps up into the air, and then that's where you get your rain clouds coming from. And it ramps up, of course, against that drier air because the moist air is lighter than the drier air. So take a look at our next slide here. The wind direction also will change along the front. That's not too surprising to anyone who knows anything about fronts. It just eventually it runs into that air, and just because they're two separate masses, they can come from a different direction. So that's why you get that change in the air. Again, typically behind the dry line, you see right there, typically weather, surface, winds. But at the same time, you got to remember there's different layers of the atmosphere too, and how high up it actually goes. There's a bunch of different factors in there, but this is just the basics of it to kind of just give you an idea and a visual. And here's, again, same frontal slope, same idea, basically. It just starts to ramp up more and more as you go later on throughout the day. The daytime does affect it too. Peak in the middle of the day, you're starting to get some drier air. It changes the how much is rising. So that's why you get those thunderstorms popping off in the middle of the day along that, along the dry line, because you get the air warming up, starts to rise, takes that moisture with it along the dry line, because remember, if they're ramming into each other, all that moisture gets built up along the wet side of the dry line, and then it gets ramped right up into the air. And again, just changes wind direction. Here's another visual on that. And of course, you have storm development as it is risen up into the air, as we've been alluding to this whole time. It gets higher and higher and up in the air, and then no different than any other front, you would say. You start to see those storms develop as the moisture air is pushed on up, and that's how your dry lines work. But we are, unfortunately, going to be talking about some more severe Texas weather. I know we talked about it last week, getting some flood watches issued, and we're not quite so bad on those this week. This isn't expected to be quite as severe of a round of flooding. But nonetheless, in spite of the fact that much of Texas, look right here in the middle, very interesting, because you see in the center of the state, you don't have drought at all. There's none of that color gradient pushed over it. You can just see the map in the gray right there. There's no drought. That's good. We don't want a drought. But there's a whole different experience when you say look up towards the Panhandle, or you look down towards the south near the Mexico border. It's all over the place. So you get these places that get way too much rain. Again, we talked about those flooding concerns in central Texas. And then around the edges, you're getting way too little. So we're going to take a look at the fact that not only is weather, in and of itself something that impacts the economy, how you get your food, how you transport, how you go about your day. But unfortunately, when one thing goes wrong, it really kind of emphasizes the problems with the others. So if we look at rising gas prices right now, for instance, when you combine that with, say, a drought, less productive crop incoming likely for many farmers, then you start to get in these modes where it's like, okay, you got to start making tougher decisions with your business. So this kind of package just kind of illustrates what farmers down in the South are looking at as we move into the next couple of days.
This is no longer a small local farm story. This is truly a big Southern farm economy story. The USDA Farm Agency is now saying that within the state of Texas, 132 Texas counties are natural disaster areas because of drought. The latest Texas drought map shows 84% of the state is abnormally dry or worse. And at the same time, diesel is inching closer to $6 a gallon nationally. That matters because farmers use diesel for tractors, irrigation, harvesting equipment, and hauling, of course. So every single pass across a field costs more. And then there is the crop itself, too. Texas Farm Bureau is reporting widespread disease pressure in their wheat fields this year. So it says that 54% of the state's wheat areas are rated poor to very poor. So farmers, they're paying more to operate, while the weather and the disease are also cutting into what they may be able to sell.
The margins in farming are pretty tight at the moment. Agriculture, with all the other inputs, the diesel fuel going up, and just the drastic increase in the fertilizer price. And so, yeah, maybe there's some trips we don't go on, or we just try to really squeeze down and be more efficient with the trips that we take.
So when you stack fertilizer concerns with drought and diesel prices going up, it all comes to a number that farmers are going, my margins are getting really tight here. And economists warn it's only a matter of time before it begins to show up more in food prices. For News Nation, I'm Anna Koyman.
Yeah, again, like we talked about, farmers having to make tough choices with how they handle their crop. Again, like we were talking about there, sometimes you're making trips, sometimes you aren't, because it's 1-2 punch of those rising diesel prices. And then again, on top of this, you do have drought in over half of the state at this point. And you got to keep in mind, Texas is massive too, so it affects a lot of output, not just in the state itself, but across the country. So we are hoping for more rainfall overall and to spread across the state, just hopefully in a more lighter, more persistent way, like we're hoping for here in western Colorado. But again, that high pressure isn't exactly a sign for enthusiasm as we move into the next week or so. So let's look a little bit further on into our forecast. What's happening as we move into the next day or so? Again, in some of those areas that we are looking at that drought in Texas, you got to keep in mind, look at that. That's a good sign. Generally speaking, you're going to get some lighter weather there, but there's some thunderstorms could be built into, but not quite this extreme, severe look. And again, you can see it transitioning right there. It's flashing on and off because it goes over the past day or so. And then all along the East Coast too, I know my head's covering it up a little bit, but there's going to be some rainfall expected. And once again, it's one of the only places in the South, deep South in particular along the coast, is where we're actually getting this energy buildup across the United States. It's the only place that moisture is really reaching in a big way right now. A lot of us, again, are looking a lot drier as we move to the next 7 days, because you got to think when high pressure moves up off the southwest, then it also cuts off what can make its way over towards, I suppose I was pointing the wrong direction here, making its way over towards the eastern portion of the United States too. So there's that big change up. It affects not just us here in the west and on the western slope of Colorado, but over towards our friends in the east too. But yeah, so you can see right here, you see the energy building up, moving a little bit along towards the southwestern portion of Texas. Again, that's good. Places that need rain, but a little bit of hail threat in there because we talked about those thunderstorms. But you can see it's flashing on and off because, again, of that transition to today's forecast. So here's what's going on right now. Again, not too much as we move to the late afternoon. I know sometimes we like to talk more about active weather on the show, but today when we're filming at about 4:24 p.m. Mountain Time, there's really not too much going on. Again, you can see some light thunderstorms ongoing, and there's some chances for some larger hail in there, like I just showed you. But again, it's going to be limited in scope, and we would like some of that rain to move a little bit further on down south in Texas. And then also hinted at, again, there's some rainfall expected along the East Coast too. Again, not the biggest, not the craziest week of weather. However, there's some thunderstorms built in there. You can kind of see a little squint really hard in the yellow, but I didn't see much of a point in zooming in too hard on it because, again, it's pretty bog standard, some kind of rain you would see towards the back half of spring. So now we're moving into our local forecast. I like to show wind gusts first just because it kind of gives an idea of, say, the calmness of the weather. Again, it's pretty marginal gusts ongoing in western Colorado. But we're going to transition away from this. We're going to take a break, but not before we talk about that snowfall. I teased it earlier on that we got over on the Front Range. I know missed out on a lot of it here on the western slope, unfortunately, but I did kind of want to do a little bit of review of what happened earlier on this week. So we're going to watch that, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about our forecast coming up here in western Colorado.
Fresh powder at A-Basin today. Several inches fell overnight. A-Basin is the last resort to stay open this season. During the week, it's open only for people willing to walk up the hill. Lifts will begin running on Friday, the final weekend of the season. The spokesman for A-Basin says it closes during the week to have fresh snow-covered runs for the weekend. But our cameras captured large numbers of people already skiing and snowboarding on Highway 6 up to Loveland Pass in the backcountry.
It was like a dream come true, getting a real powder day in May. It's pretty unreal. The snow's good, vibes are good, out here with the homies. Who needs a resort?
The Colorado Avalanche Information Center is sending out a warning to people recreating in some areas of the mountains where fresh snow has fallen. The CAIC says spring snowstorms, like the one Tuesday, create swiftly changing avalanche dangers. The center warning people to avoid areas with deeper snow on steep slopes. Skiers we spoke today told us they're taking precautions and skiing with friends.
Hi, it's meteorologist Ian Kowalski. I know you can't see me right now, but I wanted to show this cool cloud on our America's Mattress Live Tower Cam. Look up there. It looks like a swan. That's what we were talking about as we were doing the break and making sure we got the next part of the show ready. And we saw this beautiful cloud. So there, a swan cloud for those of you at 4:29 p.m. on May the 7th, 2026, a rare sight in Grand Junction. So I was happy to see that outside. In case you were wondering if your local meteorologist does just stare at the sky all day hoping something cool will happen, yes, I do, without a doubt. So, but before the break, we saw Arapahoe Basin and all that snowfall. You saw some people sneaking up there too with their ski boards, even though the basin technically in the resort wasn't technically open. So there you go. It's the last chance to go snowboarding. If you're watching this on Friday, go to the Front Range this weekend. This is your last chance. I'm pretty sure they're closing after this weekend. So, go make your final pilgrimage of skiing while you can over towards the Front Range. So there you go. Now we're looking at, unfortunately, way warmer, way drier, and way less active weather. In fact, record-setting highs are going to be expected as we get later on into next week. So first, let's talk about the winds ongoing. Again, I would like to point this out just because it really paints a good picture of the calmness. Like, this is nothing abnormal for spring, up to 25-mile-per-hour gusts during the day once you move into tomorrow and then into Saturday. It's really just a mild weather pattern. A little bit's getting in there. But even as we move into early next week, Monday, Tuesday, I expect those winds to calm down even more. Because we start to get under the center of high pressure. Get a little more subsidence, a little more sinking air, and that means warmer, calmer, drier air. And then drought, of course, we keep talking about it here on the Western Slope. I wish I wasn't talking about it personally. I wish it was just raining all the time and that we were in a perfectly much more productive season in terms of that rainfall and snow, but that's just not what we got. And so in terms of our updated drought map, let's take a look at what it actually means here for the Western Slope. Hasn't been too many changes. Remember, this is updated every Thursday, so this is the most recent look at it. A little bit in Delta getting moved into that orange severe zone, which is good. I'm happy to see that for Delta County, but Grand Junction still in that extreme drought and exceptional drought, of course, over towards the central portion of the divide and along I-70. So still a long ways to go, and unfortunately, of course, we're on the back end of spring. We're really expecting to move into drier days. And the only thing that's going to help us is when we finally get that transition to El Nino. But that's not going to happen until the middle, back into summer. So the next couple months here are going to look very dry, unfortunately. And, what we're hoping for simply is just to make the most of what we can in terms of rainfall, unlike what we got earlier on this week, where we just ended up with an overall underwhelming result from our forecast. And, of course, still a moderate drought for Montrose. There's no change there. Doing better, much better in Montrose, but still not good. Moderate drought is still not good. You still don't want a drought at all. But we did have a boost in snowpack. We're up to 25%. It was around, I believe, 16% previously. So this is a big jump. And if we just got a ton of days like we saw on the Front Range these last couple of days here, we got all that snowfall, and you moved it over to Western Slope, this number could go all the way up, but unfortunately we are stuck at 25% of average. Remember, it's less than half of where we should be at for this time of year. So it's still a dire situation. As much as we like to see any improvement at all, we're happy to get this boost of snow. We will take anything we can get, but we do still need a whole lot more as we move later on into the season. And of course, just one more time, if you didn't see the first half of the show, again, we're just expecting this zone of high pressure to sweep across the western portion of the U.S. And what that's going to mean, of course, unfortunately for us here in western Colorado, is very summer-like conditions. We're going into the low 90s by the time we get to Monday. I know I'm not looking forward to it personally going outside. I mean, I don't want to get my tan going already. I mean, I tan very easily, and just very soon I'm going to be going on camera and I'm going to look like a burnt chicken nugget or like a nice Thanksgiving turkey, and that's not what I want. But this is what we're looking at next. Again, this is just going to be the forecast for the next couple of days here. So before we talk about that, though, before we get into our future guests, I wanted to show you a pretty cool piece of technology that we are seeing introduced here on the Western Slope with Xcel Energy. Our own Kyle Kawamoto will be talking about it. It's basically just an additional way to use cameras to help fight wildfires as we rapidly approach the beginning of wildfire season. So I'll let you take a look at this cool piece of tech that you're going to be seeing implemented here across western Colorado. Then we're going to come back. We're going to take a look at our forecast. Again, it's going to be very simple. I'm telling you now, it's going to be way too warm. I would say hot in the 90s. So I'll be back in a minute. Take a look at this.
From ChatGPT to Siri, the use of artificial intelligence is rapidly growing. And now Xcel Energy is using a program to give local fire agencies a head start when it comes to battling these blazes.
As a tool to use against wildfire, this is a real game changer.
A new way of battling wildfires is on the horizon, as Xcel Energy's Panel AI system is a growing tool that fire agencies are using to combat fires.
Being able to see these things in real time changes the scope of how we fight fires and how we also mitigate the risk that can happen to other areas in and around those wildfires.
Depending on where it's at, we can get multiple views from multiple cameras and really tell us before we even get on scene what to expect and what we're headed into.
Balky and McLeod gave me a virtual tour of what this program can do. The panel system uses cameras across Mesa County to detect smoke. When spotted, it alerts agencies and allows them to view live footage. The site provides a map and direction of the camera's view, helping determine the terrain and potential response needed.
All of that intelligence allows us to make good decisions, keep our firefighters safe, and request the appropriate resources so that hopefully we can get ahead of anything that's going on.
The fire chief explains that new technology enables early responses along with pre-planning tactics in emergency situations. It allows teams to assess geographic areas and gather the resources needed before arriving, which helps improve decision-making compared to previous methods. And so far, there are several across western Colorado and 5 to 6 here in the county. And Xcel experts tell us, in respect of privacy for residents, properties will be blurred out.
We've been aggressively adding those Pano AI cameras across the state. Like I said, there are over 130 thus far, and we continue to add them. I would anticipate we will probably add more as time goes on.
Balky says this program will help reduce the chance of false fire reports. Reporting in the Master Control Room, Kyle Kawamoto, KREX News.
All right, that was a pretty cool look at technology. I mean, maybe personally, and maybe I'm the only one interested in that, but I think many of you are very interested to hear on how our local fire departments are upping their game and getting more resources in order to help them do their job the very best, keeping us safe. So that was a very cool look at that. Wicked, I would say. I mean, do the kids say that these days? I say that, but I'm not a kid anymore. Gosh, I'm getting old. 23. Oof. All right, let's take a look at our future guests as we move later on into the day. This is 8 p.m., still 70 degrees outside. Oof. But that's still average. That's typical for what we expect this time of year. And we're going to go into Friday. Our temperatures are only going to jump up more and more. We're already getting into the low 80s Friday at 2 p.m. It's tomorrow. Again, we're recording this on the 7th. And then we're going to go later on in the weekend. There's not going to be too much to talk about. Not even really any clouds in the sky. Even those lows only getting into the upper 40s and into the 50s. So even if you're getting out early in the day, a nice early morning run will feel like a daytime run earlier on this week when we actually just saw our highs in the 50s. And then moving into Saturday, seeing some light rainfall up here. I know what you're thinking, Ian, is that going to be real rain? I don't think so. I think our model is really misleading here on this one. I think that would be Virga at the very most outside of the mountains. So Montrose, I'm not really expecting anything for you. Maybe if you live along the rim of Uray, maybe you get a little bit of rain. But Saturday at 10 p.m., again, you're still hanging on to that warmth as you move later on into the evening. And then not even any clouds in the sky once you get into early Sunday morning, and then already into the low 80s and then back into the 70s as you move a little bit further on into our forecast, and then 50s overnight. And you're getting a pattern by now. There's nothing happening on our future cast. That number is very low, though. I'll tell you that. Friday at 5 p.m., my actual Monday forecast for us here in Grand Junction, just forget about that. 93 degrees. That is my high. That would be a record-setting high, and our previous record would be 90 for Monday. And so, again, just remember that model on the day on Monday. It's really not as aggressive as it should be, actually. I know our models like to overplay things a lot, but really that's too cool. We're going to be in the low 90s early next week on Monday, and on Tuesday is our current forecast is what it's looking like. So, again, just prepare yourself for that. Get your water bottle ready. I'm sure you have already. We're in the 70s. And then, the sunscreen, buy at the store this weekend. That's my tip to you. So let's take a look at our futurecast regionally. Get some scattered precipitation when you look up towards northern Colorado, over towards Steamboat a little bit in the Park Range. But it's really not going to be much, not some big boosts, which we would like. And you're getting into Friday, too, and there's still not that much happening as you look here. A little bit of rain up towards the northern portion of New Mexico, and that is it. Again, we are really just drying out here as high pressure sets into the area. And then you get a little bit more ongoing as you get towards Saturday, looking over towards the east when you go look at Kansas. Still getting used to pointing the right way. Up there behind me in the corner of the screen. You got all those thunderstorms moving on over towards our east, and then again just clearing out more a little bit. Again, mostly mountain linked and along dry lines is really all we're expecting. So no big, huge events when we look further on into our forecast. And so when you look at our futurecast, it's really not going to be anything different. Take a look here. Again, just scattered precipitation. You see a little bit ongoing down towards Texas, the bottom of our screen. No surprises there. We talked about that a little bit earlier on in the show. And then getting into the Midwest. And then I had a fake sneeze there. I'm sorry for deceiving you. But look at the Midwest. That's really our big event as we move into the week and you get this front moving on through the Midwest and then down towards the south. You really couldn't see it regionally, but that will end up being a kind of a big thunderstorm event, potentially for some tornadoes in there as you look into the weekend. But again, it's very far away from us in the western portion of the United States, so it's not going to be a big emphasis on our forecast. So here's a time lapse from earlier on this week. A little bit of light rainfall in Virgo when you look over towards the eastern portion of the Grand Valley. Some ongoing clouds. Remember, this is 20,000 speed that actually happened, multiplied by 20,000. So that's just scale of your time lapse. Again, it's kind of cool to watch these clouds roll. I really like looking at these. And I do hope to feature them more and more, but it's kind of hard to do a time lapse when the sky is blue and there's no clouds in them. And that's what we're going to be looking at a lot as we get into early next week. So thank you for watching this episode of Weather Eye. I always tell you, if you have a question for me that you'd like to answer on the show about the weather, or you would like to send in a picture that I could feature on the show, I'd be happy to do either one of those. So send me an email at my address. Oh man, I'm really not good at this, huh? There we go. All right. Send me an email right here at Kowalski at KREX.tv. I'll be happy to chat with you. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you are doing proper water management as we move into next week, because you're going to be real tempted to water your grass a lot because it's just going to dry out. It's 90 degrees already. Can you believe it? Record-setting territory is getting to Monday and Tuesday. So thank you for watching this episode. And if you want to talk more about the heat, you can find me live on air every day, of course, at 5, 6, and 10 o'clock here on KREX. Thank you.